Here we have, ladies and gentlemen, BMC's Timemachine ROAD 011, which BMC claim to be their fastest road bike to date. We've already done a first ride review on this bike, and our tester Robin Wilmot was impressed with its kind of sublime ride characteristics despite some slight shimmying from the front wheel at really high speeds. Well, now we have one in the flesh here at BikeRadar Towers, and I immediately noticed it when I walked into the workshop earlier on this week. This got both the cycling industry cynic and the believer in me thinking, this bike is probably insanely fast and it's obviously insanely expensive. But if you could afford it, what does all that speed cost you in terms of time and convenience as the end user? Is it kind of Aero Supremacy or just integration gone mad? We're going to start with the most obvious thing, and that is those crazy bottle cages. Aero frames of old were pretty fast. They were or are tested in wind tunnels, and bike manufacturers make loads of claims about them being faster than all their competitors. And this is obviously kind of weird because, you know, every bike manufacturer has a bike that is apparently faster than the other, but we'll leave that for now. Only problem is, take a bike out of the wind tunnel and those aero claims start to fall apart because, well, the wind tunnel isn't the real world and out there things are different. One of the most obvious places that happens is with bottles and bottle cages. As soon as an aero bike has a bottle put on it, it can often compromise the real world aerodynamics. If you're out racing, if you're out riding, you're gonna definitely want a bottle on your bike. So BMC's answer to this was to build the bottle cages and some bike storage into the frame, meaning that in theory, the bike is gonna be faster with the bottle cages and the bottles on than without. Now, this is a pretty good idea, but it does come with some practical costs. Obviously, there may only be certain types of bottles that fit into those cages, and the cages themselves are totally proprietary. So if you're on holiday and you were to crack a cage or something was to break, it's going to be quite hard to find a replacement nice and quickly. Finally, if you're a racer, leaving the bottles in for a kind of steep hilltop finish or anything like that means that you're going to be carrying some extra weight, even though the bike is supposedly faster with the bottles in. So now you have to make the decision, do I keep the bike aerodynamically efficient by leaving the bottles in? Or do I take them out and then I'm a bit lighter? But I have compromised my aerodynamics. For me, I'd call this one a draw. Those bottle cages might be slightly inconvenient, but they have been made in a way that makes you faster and they still have an air of practicality and real world usability. An area which could be slightly more problematic is the bars and stem. The ICS Aero cockpit looks pretty amazing, and as that old cliche goes, you know, even standing still, it looks fast. But what does that mean for a normal person like you and me? Well, the Aero cockpit might make you incrementally faster, but it is going to cost you a lot of time in terms of convenience and usability. Now, BMC do offer some different bar widths and stem lengths, so it'll fit most people. But if you sit on the kind of extreme end of a fit spectrum, if you're kind of very small or broad or very tall, you might find that you can't quite get the right size you want with that bar and stem combo. And if you do want to change the size, obviously it's not a quick trip to the bike shop for a cheap set of handlebars or stem to try out. It's ordering it in, especially from BMC, because, well, those parts are quite specific. That's not to say BMC haven't thought about time and convenience when designing this bar and stem combo. Speaking to our workshop manager who builds all the bikes that come through BikeRadar, he said that the stem, which is modular, meaning parts come off the bottom and off the front to access the cables, is actually quite easy to work on. So while it does look fairly complex, it's not actually as difficult to remove those stem and bars as it is on other kind of super high-end aero bikes. Although our workshop manager did forewarn us that if you were to go on holiday with this bike, it's going to be quite difficult to pack into a bike bag. Basically, the cable routing is so tight in there, all the Di2 cables, it does look very neat, but it means that the bars, I don't know if you can see, will only rotate that far. So when you're packing your bike bag, the idea that you're going to be able to turn the bars to keep everything nice and neat, that's not going to be possible. It'll probably need to have all the cables undone. Obviously, this is going to cost you a lot of time and faff when you get to the other end of your trip. Next up is the seat post. BMC's Aero seat post is a pretty impressive bit of kit because there's loads of adjustment there, so you can have it inline or kind of 10mm setback. Where I'm not so sure about it, and this is the kind of bane of a lot of home mechanics that own aero bikes the world over, is where you adjust the seat post height, which is under there. It's fairly easy to access with a kind of normal Allen key when you're at home, but But if you're out and about, out on the roads, and you want to make some small adjustments, which people often do, that is going to be quite difficult to access with a kind of more bulky multi-tool that most people carry around. Again, I guess I'd like a more easily reachable seat post adjustment than any small Aero advantage that one there might bring. Ideally, on the back would be great. One thing I think is worth mentioning, we've had this size 56 on the scales and it weighs just over 7.5 kilos, which, I mean, it's not super light, but it's definitely not heavy for an out and out Aero bike. And finally, we have the looks of the bike, and whether it's cool or not to admit, most cyclists care about how their bike looks. For the time being, in 2019, this BMC looks pretty cool, I'd say. It's got that kind of industrial BMC angular look, and it's got that battleship grey finish. But I'd wager a bet that in maybe 5 years' time, this bike is going to look quite dated. A prime example of another bike which a number of the BikeRadar staffers think is now quite dated looking is the old Specialized Venge Vice. When that first came out, all those cool handlebar shapes and the kind of wavy lines, it looked really cool and modern. Now, the new Venge is out, the new Specialized, it's got a much more traditional shape, and it means the old Specialized Venge Vice feels a bit out of place amongst the current crop of more traditional looking Aero road bikes. But obviously, looks are subjective, so you can let me know how wrong I am in the comments. Another thing by my comments about the Specialized Venge Vice, which might make you angry, is the price of this bike. This is obviously the top spec model, and it's the first year it's been out, so it's not going to be cheap, but wait for it. It costs 12,000 euros and about £10,500, I think. So it is not a cheap bike. But as the saying always goes, if you want the best, if you want the fastest, you're gonna have to pay top dollar for it. So there we have BMC's new Time Machine. I suspect it's going to be an incredibly fast, high performance bike, but it could cost you a lot of time in terms of cost and convenience. But what do you guys think? Is integration the way forward, or has the bike industry gone too far? As always, let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.